Hey there, as a Latter-day Lights listener, I want to give you a very special gift today. My brand new book, Faith to Stay. This book is filled with inspiring stories, powerful discoveries, and even fresh insights to help strengthen your faith during the storms of life. So, if you're looking to be inspired, uplifted, and spiritually recharged, just visit faithtostay.com. Now, let's get back to the show. Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alisha Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how years of trials taught one family that sometimes even the rockiest paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad that you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce our special guest all the way from Australia, Jac Woodhouse. Jac, welcome.
Hi guys.
G'day, mate.
Yes. G'day, how are you?
We're good. I'm curious, how is it living in the future?
Yes, literally I am in the future. So nothing much to report. So it's all good so far.
World hasn't ended yet. Good to know. We still got what? 15 hours? No.
Something like that. You've got a 15-hour heads up.
There you go.
Okay, but if the world does end, tell us as soon as you find out, okay? Give us a heads up.
Yeah. You'll be the first.
Oh, man. Well, Jac, thanks so much for reaching out to us all the way from Australia. We always love when we find out that, like, we literally are global, right? Like that the podcast has reached far across the 7 seas. There's 7. No. All across the oceans, all across the lands. We love hearing that Latter-day Lights is literally lighting the world with stories from guests like you. So thanks so much for reaching out and being willing to share your story today. Before we jump into what you're going to talk to us about, we'd love to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I am a mum in Australia. I live in New South Wales, and I have 3 sons. One who's 27, who's technically my stepson, but I pretty much raised him. And then my husband and I have 2 other boys, 17 and 15. 17-year-old has disabilities and issues and health issues and so on, but yeah, we live here in Newcastle, New South Wales now for the last 10 years. My husband was originally from a regional town in Goulburn, which is where I met him. And we've been members of the church now since 2020. We were baptised as a family in February 2020, just before COVID opened up. And so that was a really interesting time to go through, to join the church, and then basically everything was shut down and we couldn't access anything, and we were kind of left floating for a while, and it was a very interesting time. My husband's a builder, and we just basically doing our best to keep our heads above water each and every day and do our best to serve others and serve our ward, and just try and endure to the end, so to speak.
Yeah. That's awesome. I've said it before on the show. I'll say it again. Anytime that I hear that you have 3 or more boys, instant entry into heaven. Like, you've done your due diligence. There's literally nothing you could do on this earth that would send you to hell, because I'm sure you've already been through your own little version of it from time to time.
Well, if that's the theory, then I should actually get further merit badges, because our eldest son actually just had their 3rd son, so we have 3 grandsons as well. So so we've I said to my daughter-in-law, to be a female in this family, you just have to marry in. You can't be born into this family. It's just boys. So,
wow.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yep. You get bonus points for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we would love to hear more about this family of yours and the journey that you guys went through. So we'll go ahead and put you front and center and let you tell us where your story began.
Okay, so basically I reached out to you guys based on a talk that I gave at state conference a couple of years ago where I was asked to give a bit of a background because we were reasonably new members as a family. So I guess the story starts where in Goulburn, my husband and I were prison officers for 15 years in a maximum security jail. We often get a bit of a joke telling people that, we met in jail. So,
nice.
Yeah, that always...
Which explains why you could handle 3 kids that are all boys and then now 3 grandboys too, because you just dealt with,
maybe,
rough and tough.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the oldest jails in Australia and maximum security and so on. So I transferred down there in 1999 and met my now husband Brad, and I had envisaged that I would have a future in that industry. That I loved it. Despite how hard it was and challenging it was, I loved it. And I was working my way up through management and getting promotions and so on. And 2007, I went for a promotion and I was promoted into middle management. Now, to set the scene, I guess, with the way it is in the jail system and still is, but especially back then, it was very much a I hate saying a boys' club, very misogynistic, very, there weren't many women in that system, in that environment at the time, let alone in management. So I went for the promotion and I was promoted, which made me one of 3 female managers at the time out of about 25. And I was also the youngest by many years. And around the same time that I was promoted, I found out I was pregnant with our middle child. And so, yeah, it was made for a really interesting time coming into that. So there weren't a lot of other managers that were very happy about my promotion. So you can imagine that kind of set into effect a whole, I guess the best way they put us on a very challenging path because my husband was also obviously a prison officer, but he was of a lower rank. So there were lots of things that came into play where he became collateral damage in his career as well through all the efforts that were extended to me, I guess, to try and push me out of the position that I was in, to try and challenge me. And then when I had to let them know that I was pregnant, they'd never actually had a manager who'd been in that position. They'd never had. So not only did they have a young female that in management that they didn't want there, then they had to deal with a young female manager who was having children and having all of those issues. So it basically was just it was the perfect storm, I guess, is the best way to put it. And so then our son was born in 2008, and there were a lot of things that were done wrong, and that I missed out on a lot of things that I should have been afforded during my maternity leave and things like that. And I'm probably skipping over a lot, but I don't want to bore people with the ins and outs. I came back to work after his birth, and I was put into situations and positions and places where, for example, I just had, I had a newborn at home, and I was put into managing a child sex offenders wing, things like that. These were sort of the things that these other people in management were trying to do to break me effectively. They were trying to put me into, so I was having to manage these inmates who had done horrific things to children and babies and so on, that I was having to manage them. And at the same time, I've got a newborn at home that, I'm sitting there dealing with these inmates that all I could picture was my own newborn. So it was a very challenging time, really played with me mentally and emotionally. At the same time, there were just lots of other pressures coming in that, I should have been given leeway and allowances, which I wasn't. I was just expected to toe the line like every other manager. So it just made it was basically the start of like me mentally breaking down. I was put onto a path of mental illness, and which made it really difficult. And then, so there's the son that I was pregnant with when I was promoted. He's had a lot of health issues. He was born with some disabilities and health issues, serious health issues. We nearly lost him the day that he was born, so that complicated things as well, like privately. So then, with the culmination of all these pressures at work and privately at home with his health and his issues, we had decided that we had been trying for another child, and it got so bad that my husband and I both made the decision that we were going to stop trying, that it was just too much happening. And then the very next day, lo and behold, found out I was pregnant with our third son. And I was just sent into a massive spin of, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? How are we going to cope? I haven't been coping so far. And yeah, so then we had this third child to now take into the mix. And this is part of what plays into our testimony, because jumping forward, it was our third son who was effectively responsible for helping us find the church. But prior to this, like after I just found out that I was pregnant with him, I was in such a bad way mentally that I had planned to have him terminated. I just couldn't. I was really, really sick, with a lot morning sickness as well. So that exacerbated everything that was already going on professionally, and then personally with our other son with his health issues. So I was in a world of physical and mental and emotional turmoil that I just struggle to put into words even today, and which doesn't excuse the thoughts that I had about terminating that pregnancy, but just kind of hopefully puts it into perspective for people that, and hopefully they're not going to be too judgmental of me. But it was just something that I just couldn't see a way around. Thankfully, my husband and my mother talked me out of it, and we went on to have him, and he has been an amazing blessing, because, like I said, years down the track, he actually became the reason that we found the church. And I look back now, and again I see, with the benefit of hindsight, that he was put into our family to help us along that path to where we are today. So following his birth in 2010, things got even worse. They were constantly, we had the issues with his brother, the middle son, were getting worse. I was struggling to balance my professional and personal life, and managers there were basically using all of these things to their advantage. It was just a horrible time to be trying to manage a professional and personal balance. I was at the mercy of all of these people who had really maligned agendas that were trying to force me out of where I was. And essentially in the end of mid to late 2011, I was made redundant from my job. I had put in a lot of paperwork with a lot of complaints speaking out about, there was a lot of sexual harassment, sex discrimination, grooming. And to this day, unfortunately, there's still a lot of women that are just, so it wasn't just me, it was, I chose to speak out about it at the time, but I was effectively ignored and dismissed. Like, I was made redundant as a result of speaking. So I lost my career. 15 years and 1 week was the anniversary of me joining the department. And so then my husband and I, and then like I said earlier, my husband's career was pretty much collateral damage as well. So then within a week, he was redundant. So then we were basically thrown out from these, steady, well-paying jobs and careers, and we had kind of seen the writing on the wall of what was coming. So we had started a side business, a business ourselves, which we then kind of stepped across into, but we had no business sense, we had no business knowledge. We were basically just scrambling day in, day out between juggling what was going on professionally, what was happening, personally, trying to stay afloat financially. So for 4 years, we made a success of it. We had the first mobile coffee business in Goulburn, in a regional town. We started that up, and I'm very proud to say that. But we didn't have a lot of business sense, and we lost everything. We ended up losing, after we had lost our careers and our steady incomes, we ended up trying to stay ahead of bankruptcy and things like that. We had to sell our house. We had to sell our investment property. So we lost all of those things. We then, after years, and at the same time too, we were dealing with our son's disabilities. So he was also diagnosed with juvenile arthritis when he was 2. So we were spending a lot of time trying to manage his pain, manage his treatments, and being in a regional area, that meant that we had to take him to Sydney and back. So that was like mostly a turnaround the entire day and a turnaround trip. So if we weren't working, we weren't earning money, as small business goes. So we were just falling further and further down the rabbit hole of just basically each and every day we were just trying to keep going, keep our family going, keep our businesses going. And eventually we came to a point where we decided, because I was originally from Newcastle, and so we knew that things just weren't working for us as they should be in Goulburn. We knew that we didn't have family support. Our son needed better treatments, better access to treatments and services and supports. And so we made the decision in 2015 to move to Newcastle to be near family. And so we moved up here, and my husband, we sold our business down there, and my husband continued working as a builder and moved up here with that. And in the process, my mental health was just declining, just getting worse and worse. I had many moments of just not wanting to be here anymore, feeling like that my family were better off without me. So I was in some pretty dark places, and thankfully my husband was massive support and just kept us all going. I ended up finding out that I could start taking legal action against the department, and I hadn't known this prior to everything, because we hadn't had time to really investigate anything or any financial opportunities for compensation or anything like that. And I was with a counsellor one day, and she said to me about reopening my workers' compensation claim, and I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you could reopen it and try and regain some sort of, compensation or something like that." So long story short, I made some inquiries, and I found out that I could actually, in fact, reopen my workers' compensation claim for psychological injuries, which I did, which then started off a massive fight again. So when you take on a state government department, that's a pretty massive path to go down.
Yeah.
Yep. So if I knew then what I knew now, I may not have done it. But I guess these things are, we go on these paths for a reason. So I started this fight, and I went to the Australian Human Rights Commission for sex discrimination, and found my claim was terminated immediately under that legal avenue, because I found out that ever since the Sex Discrimination Act had been started in 1984 here in Australia, state public servants across the country weren't actually protected by it. They weren't covered by it. There was a clause in there, a section that exclusively precluded any state public servant being protected by a Sex Discrimination Act, which when I read that, and I thought, how is that even possible? How is that in this day and age? So that meant anybody who was a teacher, a nurse, a police officer, a prison officer, a fire in the part of the fire brigades, ambulance, anybody who across the country who was employed under their state government, they had no protections if they were sexually discriminated against in their employment. So I had to go a different legal route for myself personally at that stage, and I just had no way to go through that. But having said that, I then started down a path of actually lobbying state parliamentarians to have the legislation changed. And around that time was when we had the whole Me Too movement going across the world. And so we had a lot of things going on here. And then there was actually calls for, there was lots of things happening here in Australia at the time. So I had written to our state premier complaining about, things that were wrong with our system and what was, what women were facing in the workforce and so on. And I was threatened legally to basically, stop speaking up and all of these things. And I ended up attending, there was a nationwide inquiry done by the Human Rights Commission here that were looking to make changes to the Sex Discrimination Act. So I went there and I put forward, that we needed to have this section removed it needed to be repealed. And long story short there, we, not just me, but, people like me who spoke up about this in particular, we had it repealed. We managed to have that removed. So now we can safely say that, state public servants across Australia now have protection under the Sex Discrimination Act, which was, something that I'm proud to have been a part of. But
yeah, that's awesome.
I know that, if I hadn't have been put through these things, I wouldn't have been aware of it and I wouldn't have been able to speak up about it. And I did interviews with a couple of journalists. We spoke up, which then created a lot more attention, and I made headlines with it in, drawing attention for other women who were facing the same thing. So then they were then able to access the legal avenues that they needed under similar circumstances. So, I guess there's another bright spot in all the darkness, I guess, for so many others.
Awesome.
So yeah, and then I guess around that time I was going through all these legal avenues between 2017 and 2021, and then one of the big turning points was that I had an uncle pass away in 2019. And so around that time, our youngest son, and at that stage we were living next door to members of the church. They're like family to us now. And we were living next to them, and we had been invited to a couple of things at our now chapel, our now ward. And my son with the disabilities, he had actually, when we had enrolled our boys in school up here in Newcastle, we actually made friends with some members from the church. And yeah, there was looking back now, there was all of these connections, all of these little stepping stones being put into place that we didn't realize at the time, that, we were becoming introduced to members of the church and the church itself. And so around 2019, my uncle passed away, and our youngest son had lots of questions about what happens when we die, where do we go when we die. And at that stage, we weren't going to church, but he was actually going to church with our neighbours. So he was actually going. He would get himself up. Yeah, he was. And when I say he was our link to getting us into the church, he would get himself up. I think he was only about 9 at the time, 2017, 2018. Yeah, he would have been 9 years old. So he would get himself up of a Sunday morning, and he would get himself showered and dressed, and he would jump in the car with our neighbours and go off to the ward and go to church and come home. And we were like, like I grew up, I was born into the Catholic Church. I went to a Baptist church with my neighbours, a very similar thing to what he was doing. So I've always known that there's something there. And so we certainly didn't, we was like, whatever you need to do, you do it. We're encouraged, any sort of knowledge or interest. And then when my uncle died, he said, really, what happens? Where do we go? What do we do? What happens after we leave here? And so our neighbours invited us to their family home evening with some elders, and they taught us the plan of salvation. And so we had that there, and we had some booklets that we took home with us. And it was around this time that all my legal stuff was really ramping up, and my mental health was really declining at the same time. And I actually had a massive breakdown just after this, and had a massive mental breakdown. And I was actually in my son's bedroom, and I was in the darkest hole that I could that I had ever been in to this point. And I was really contemplating whether sorry. Contemplating whether to still stay. And I was curled up in his bed, and I rolled over, and I saw the Plan of Salvation booklet on his bedside, and I grabbed it and I read it again. And to this day, all I can do is say that it was just the Holy Ghost came over me. I've never experienced a feeling like it. And I just felt completely at peace. And I got up and I went, right, that's it. And I went downstairs, and my husband was just sitting at the dinner table. He was just beside himself. He didn't know what to do. He was exhausted from everything. And I put the Plan of Salvation booklet down in front of him, and I said, I'm going to church. You can either come with me or not. That's your choice. But this is what I'm doing. This is what I now know that I need. And to his credit, he said, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So we started going to church. This was 2019. We started meeting with the missionaries. We started, doing everything it was. And then 1st of February 2020, we were baptised as a family the day before our youngest son's birthday, his 10th birthday. Okay. And, and then ever since we've my husband's now part of the elders quorum. He serves on the elders quorum in our ward. I'm an advisor for the young women's in our ward. I just the miracles that we have seen since we have turned our lives around and joined the church. And my husband and I also serve at the Sydney Australia Temple. We go down there weekly and serve as well. And it's just true, like the blessings that have come and the people that we've met, where we are now as a family. Like, I just know that we wouldn't be here if we hadn't have been on the path that we had, and all of these trials that we went through, all the things that we've had to endure and lost, and nearly given up, lost hope. Yeah, we wouldn't be here if it hadn't have been for the path that we were on. And I guess that's ultimately just what I wanted to share with people, was my testimony that it is true. It is. And I wouldn't be sitting here before you today if it hadn't have been for this church.
Yeah. Wow. So spending most of your life outside of the church and then learning all the things that, about the church, like, what do you like? Do you ever think about the difference in what your life was like beforehand?
Yeah. Look, I mean, even something as simple as like we ran a mobile coffee business. So there, in effect, was we were inhaling coffee on a daily basis for 4 years. Like we were just, and even when we moved up here, like we ended up giving up tea and coffee cold turkey. We were just bang, that's it, done. We were drinkers. We weren't big drinkers, but we still drank. So simple things like that in terms of like following the word of wisdom and so on it was like a no-brainer to us. But it was, so there's all of those things that were completely foreign to us to start with, but now it's like I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I couldn't imagine being that person that I was beforehand, before we found the church, and before we changed as people and we changed as a family. And that's not to say it's all been, an easy ride. Like even like our middle son, he still struggles with a lot of things, and he questions stuff still to this day. But hopefully he'll find his own testimony, and all we can do is provide that, and surround him with the people that are good role models and good examples and so on. But yeah, it's from coming from outside the church and spending 40 odd years living life as we thought it should be. It's I feel more at peace being where I am now.
That's awesome. Can I ask, so like when you mentioned the struggle that you had with like thoughts of suicide and things like that, do you feel like after joining the church those have lessened or gone away, or is that still something that kind of hits you from time to time that you're still working through?
Yeah, definitely still working through. Mental health, mental illness is a real thing. It's depression and those feelings of worthlessness, that everyone will be better off without you around. Like before I went through this and experienced all this, I guess that's probably another reason why I had to go through these things, I think, is to be humbled and to understand and be able to walk in somebody else's footsteps. Because prior to me experiencing things, I had no understanding of what depression was. I just thought, why can't you just get up? Why can't you just smile? Why can't you just, for other people? I just didn't have that understanding and that empathy, whereas now I do, obviously. And joining the church wasn't a miracle pill. Like, it hasn't been, wave a magic wand by any means. And everything's better, I still have days that, I don't want to get out of bed, but they're far less. And I do have the supports now to help me with that I didn't before. I have the scriptures to go to. I have people that I can talk to. I know that the thoughts in my head aren't mine. They're not, all these negative thoughts. I know where they're coming from now. It doesn't mean that they're any easier to fight off, but I guess it's just being able to recognize and have that support to say, look, this isn't real. You will get through this, and finding and having the resources to do it, to help. And I guess that's probably the beauty of this, and trying to say to people, both my husband and I have identified actually that people who have grown up in the church, I don't think fully appreciate what they've had and what they do have. I think it's very easy. We witness from where we stand and our experiences that there are a lot of people who take for granted the lifestyle that they've been brought up in and the supports that they've had. And for us, never having had that until the last 5 years, we're very grateful and very appreciative, and we identify it for what it is. And I guess that's probably a really key thing for having not grown up in the church as opposed to somebody who has. I think it's very easy for people to not realize what they've had and throw it away very easily.
Right.
Yeah.
What about like your perspective as far as not being a member of the church? Because, now that you're a member of the church, trying to share the gospel with people that aren't members of the church, right? You were on that side for most of your life. How do you have any thoughts on ways that members can reach people that are not members?
Yeah, I think actions speak louder than words.
Okay.
I guess, and looking back, I feel I probably I don't remember crossing paths with members, but I have crossed paths with missionaries of other churches, other faiths, where I've kind of blown them off in the past, and which I regret now, because I identify that as they're just sharing faith and sharing what I now know is the truth. I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that I don't try to verbally convince people. I try to convince people by my actions that, if that my service to other people, or my empathy to other people, or just going about supporting people as best I can is going to lead to a discussion of why I do what I do, and then be able to introduce my faith and the church and what we're about. And does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's reassuring, because a lot of times, as members, I mean, I've grown up my whole life in the church, but you just wonder how, if you're actually making a difference doing those things, right? Being that good example and just trying to live a Christ-like life. But it sounds like, from your perspective on the other side, those are the things that ultimately do make the difference. So we should just keep trying to do that.
Yep, by all means. I mean, like I said, the family that our neighbours that, have become like family to us, they're just beautiful people, and they're just so giving and so loving and so open, open in whether it was a material thing that we needed support with, or just emotional support, or anything, or advice, or they're just a loving, beautiful family. So, and then the other families at our children's school, when we first moved to Newcastle, it was the same thing. We were drawn to these people because of their natures, the type of people that they are, just so giving and loving and serving, and it was just something that we gravitated towards, because I think essentially my husband and I both, despite not being religious as such prior to coming into the church, we were still always people that would help others if they needed it. I think it just helped us gravitate more by seeing these members. We could align ourselves with them because they were just such giving people. They were always just there to help others that needed help, regardless of who the person was that needed the assistance.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be, having not grown up in the church, by just, what is it? You will know them by their fruits. Is that the scripture? Yeah. That just always has stood out to me, because, and what I try to live by is, it's not so much you can say all these things, and you can sprout scripture and say all the right things, but if you're not following through or living those words, I think is the difference.
Yeah. Wow. So tell me, because one of the other parts of a big part of your story was after going through that whole experience of the inequality at work, and just kind of having that ickiness, right, happen to you, and meeting defeat instantly, like when you first went to file a suit, right, and just to be denied instantly. Most people would stop there. Like, if they were brave enough to actually go forward and even start a claim, right, most people would stop after they were like, oh. So how do you think, and even though you weren't a member of the church at the time, how do you think it was that you were able to keep going? I mean, you said you grew up Catholic, right? And so, like, you must have already had that belief in God, and, am I right? Like, you...
Yeah. I guess, and to kind of backtrack a bit, when I went to university and then pretty much followed up within a couple of years of that, falling into the prison system, I lost a lot of my religious beliefs, because I was, especially in the jails, I was kind of like, how on earth can there be a God with all of this evil and horror and the things that these people are doing to each other? How can there be a God? So I kind of got to a point where I didn't necessarily believe in a God, but I believed in something. There was something bigger. That everything happens for a reason. That was the philosophy that I kind of tried to live my life by, trying to make sense of everything, all of the inequality, all the injustice, all of the, seeing what some of these inmates had actually done and were continually doing to other people. Some of it was pretty horrific. So I guess I sort of put it into a context that I could understand and live by, was that, everything happens for a reason. There's something out there in the universe that I can't explain and I don't really know about, but I'm just putting faith in the fact that all of this is happening for a reason. And I do remember when I opened that letter, having my claim denied, that, that there was no avenue to pursue, and just the injustice of it. I remember thinking, well, that's not right. I need to do something about this. Maybe I've been, maybe this has happened for a reason. Like, it's just one of the, and then after that, then I fell into a heap and cried, and, it was like, screamed and ranted and raved, about the injustice of it all and how could this happen? But I do remember thinking, this has happened for a reason. This is like, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, Alisha, but it's kind of, I guess it kind of put me on that path. It was like, well, I'm not standing for this. I've got nothing left to lose, and maybe this has happened for a reason. So I've just got to find a way to do something about it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit beforehand, Jac, about how when you look back in your life and you can see certain things that have happened, and you're like, well, if that wouldn't have happened, then this wouldn't have happened, then this wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't be here, right?
Exactly.
So
yep.
Things do happen for a reason, and God's in the details. You just don't ever know how those dots are going to add up, right?
No, and the key point to that is the simple fact that when I look back, none of this would have happened if I hadn't have been promoted into that position of management, where it was a boys' club and it was misogynistic, and women weren't accepted in that role. If I'd have just kept going where I was as just a run-of-the-mill prison officer, my head wouldn't have been up on show, and I wouldn't have drawn all of that negative attention and negative activity to myself and my family. But the key point to it all, when I really the aha moment, was when I look back. When I was promoted, there was a panel of 3 people that were responsible for doing all of the interviews and doing the actual promoting. And one of the men that were on that panel he has grown up in the church. He's a long-time member of the church. And when I found that out, probably it was around the time, actually, I think I was doing my talk for state conference, and I actually started connecting the dots and realized that this gentleman was a member of the church, and I confirmed it. I made sure I got the confirmation. It was kind of like a light bulb moment. So here there was a plan. God had a plan, and I still don't know. I still haven't, for just to, full disclosure, it's not like we've reached some pinnacle and, our family, that we've come to the end of a really great movie and we've achieved all these goals or anything. It's still a work in progress. But it's when I look back, there was a plan. God had a plan for us, that, this guy was part of the promotional team that promoted me, that threw me into this turmoil and all of this loss and all of these horrible things that I wouldn't even wish on an enemy, that I and my family have sort of stumbled through for so many years. But you look back and it's like, well, there was a path, there was a plan, there's something there, and it's not for me to try and explain or understand, but I look at that and I go, well, again, how else do you explain it? So
yeah. Well, I know you're not at your pinnacle yet, but
definitely not.
I definitely, imagine that you're kind of on the upswing at this point. I mean, I feel like it's one of those, in all things, there must needs be opposition, but that also means that when you've hit your really low low, there has to be a really good high, right? It's got to be coming at some point. That's just what I think anyway. So, gosh, Jac, are there, do you have any last thoughts, anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today before we wrap up?
I guess as growing up as not being a lifetime member of the church, is just don't take for granted what you have, and, appreciate the church, appreciate the teachings. Things, it's not a magic wand. It's not going to make anybody's life, perfect. It's not going to, the problems aren't going to disappear, but lean on the resources that are available and lean on the people around us in the church and take guidance from, from the prophet and from his counselors and from your ward leaders, and embrace it. And I guess be a good person to others, and just be mindful of how your actions and your words are going to affect others, and that it's not just the person in front of you, but they have families behind them that are being affected by your actions, and just try and do good.
I love it. That's perfect. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jac, for coming on here today, for reaching out to us all the way from across the world and in the future. I'm really just, I don't know, it's just been a pleasure being able to hear you and your story, and just the takeaway that you guys have. Like, your whole family seems to just kind of exude light. And so I love that. I love seeing that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I love to hear stories like yours, Jac, where, there's trials through life. You don't know where they're going. And sometimes you don't feel like you can even take one more step or another breath. Right. Mm-hmm. But somehow you make it through that. And then God's right there, and he's got you, and he's got a plan. I just love that. It's so inspiring. So thanks for coming on and sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you. I just hope it helps somebody out there that, if they've got doubt or questions, then just hopefully it might support somebody else in their journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think it will. So, all right. Well, folks, that's all that we have for today. Remember, if you guys are listening right now and you are feeling like you might have a story to share, you might know someone who would be able to be a great guest here on the show, like Miss Jac, reach out to us. You can email us at latterdaylights@gmail.com, or you can head over to latterdaylights.com and fill out the contact form at the bottom of the page. And please, please, please don't forget to do your 5-second missionary work. Share this episode, comment on here, let Jac know what part of her story really resonated with you, or what kind of thoughts and feelings you've had about it. And I guess I think that's pretty much all we have, right, Scott?
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day, Jac.
Thank you. You too.
We're gonna go to sleep on this side of the world. So.
I got to finish the rest of my day yet.
There you go.
Well, thanks again, Jac. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week with another episode of Latter Day Lights. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.